I'm working on something that I have never done before. I'm going to be taking all of the original dark stain and finish from this piece of furniture and adding some Petit Fleur IOD paint inlays for a beautiful cottage-like finish. So, like I said, this is completely new to me. It's going to be one of those tutorials where you'll learn along with me as I learn how to make this happen. I think it worked out all right because you've already seen the picture at the front of this video. Somehow I got to that point. Let's take a closer look at the piece of furniture. Process in this tutorial is to remove all of the varnish and the dark stain. I want to make this piece look a little bit like old pine, so it needs staining a little lighter before we can move on and do any of the decorative work. So I'm going to tackle this in 3 different ways. I've got a carbide scraper to remove the top surface of the varnish. I'll be using a chemical stripper to remove any other residue. And once that's all cleaned up, I will be going in with my sander to reveal all of this beautiful grain that is in this piece. The reason I'm doing this on this piece is because the whole thing is actual solid timber. There is no veneer. So you wouldn't be using a carbide scraper on veneer because you would just scrape straight through that surface. But everything on this piece, even the side panels, is solid wood. So I can really go at this to get back down to the original wooden surface. So this is going to take a little time. So I'm going to let you watch me on fast play and see all of this happen pretty quick. So all of my varnish remover paint stripper has been washed away from the piece. The wood has just about dried, so I'm good to go in with my sanding. I've got two sanders. I've got a small orbital sander and a mouth sander with a point to be able to get into the corners. I'm going to start off with 180 grit and move down to 120 grit, and then there's going to be an awful lot of hand sanding just to get into all of the crevices and the detailed work. It is a labour of love, but it will be worth it in the end. Has been a mammoth job of sanding, and there's still more to go. I've got to go back in with a hand sand around the feet because the sander just can't make it round the feet, and some of these details. I just want to make sure that there is no varnish or anything there to stop my colour stain. So whilst we're talking about stain, as you can see, this piece of furniture is made from many different pieces of wood. So the reddest piece of wood is the dividers between the drawers, and then the drawer fronts are a lot redder than the trims around the edges, as is the sides, which you can't see at the moment. They're much redder. The down support, the legs and the top are a much paler wood, which I think it's probably a different type of wood. So on old furniture, they probably used dark stain to blend in all of these different kinds of wood. So it might have had one stain on the drawer fronts and an extra stain on the lighter areas where you see that the timber is a lot paler. So we've got to do exactly the same thing with our colour wash or stain that we're going to make with chalk paint to make everything much paler. So we're going to give the areas that are lighter just one pass, probably a coat of chalk paint watered down, and then in the areas where it's much redder we're going to add a little bit more pigment. So we're going to take some paint straight from the can almost with the colour wash and just soften each area in. Hopefully we'll still get to see all of the beautiful wood grain whilst knocking every red tone out of this, and I will give you a little recipe for the colour that we're going to mix to try and knock out some of this mahogany tone a little later on. another bit of sanding, so bear with me and then we can get on with all of the staining. If you want to make a stain to knock out red tones, one of my favourite colours to do this with is Versailles, Sloan Versailles. And that's because it's pale and it's got an undercurrent of green. So red is on the opposite side of the colour wheel to green, and it basically will neutralise or tone down some of the red tones. But I am going to add a touch of French linen, which is also a wonderful colour. If you just use this as a colour stain over wood, it kind of looks a little bit coastal. So I'm going to go with more Versailles and a touch of French linen, a splash of water, quite a bit, just to make it a liquid. And then I'm going to have the Versailles on hand just to go a little bit heavier over the red toned pieces of wood. I'm not going to do the top, I'm going to work around the outer body first, just so I can get a good feel for it. And the main areas, such as the top and the drawer fronts, will work a little later on when I've got a much better feel for what I'm working with. So in for a penny, in for a pound, let's mix up the colour wash or stain. Versailles, going to be dumped into, it's a leftover can, so great for this, great for using it as a stain. I'll keep a little bit of the can to one side, and then touch of French linen. So I'm going to show you just how much in proportion, just a little bit of French linen. I think it'll just add a little bit extra to it. And then I'm going to splash it with water, quite a bit. It needs to be really runny, and I've got a small chip brush. And I'm working, normally I do a colour stain with a big brush over the big areas, but because I'm working in these small areas, I want to be a little bit more directional. So once this is mixed up and it goes on, I want to tone it out a little bit more. I'm going to take some paint straight from the can, so that ultimately I can add more pigment over the darker areas, if that makes sense. I'm now day 2 of this project. All has dried overnight, but I've got to say, this is not working out for me. All of that sanding and stripping, I think it's going to be in vain. The wood stain on the lower half has taken so much more paint to balance out the colour, which means that I've lost a lot of the grain underneath the paint. And I've also come across another issue overnight where the little nails have been in the trim section. The nails have rusted and come to the surface. There's also other black dots, which I think is original fly speck, which I spend a lot of time putting fly speck on my pieces, but this was not one of them that I'd hoped to do that. So I've got 1 or 2 issues and I've got to rectify them. I feel a little bit of annoyed because I think it'll end up being one flat colour at the lower half of this piece, which would have saved me hours of sanding and stripping. The top is just fine. The reason I think the top accepted the stain much better than the lower, it's because it's a different piece of wood. This is probably oak on the top, and the bottom half was most definitely mahogany, which is a more closed grain piece of wood, and the stain was just not accepting it. And whereas the top, it soaked in beautifully well. So they're the issues. The first thing that I'm going to do is carry on with the process that I was going to do, and that was to give this a whole top coat of Sloan matte lacquer, because I needed that on there anyway to start the paint inlays and see what lies through the lacquer, because this could all change a lot more once it gets paint on it, and then we can try and fix some of those other issues. So fingers crossed we don't have to do any more. At worst, I will paint the whole lower half in a similar colour because I quite like the colour. Yeah, let's see what happens when the lacquer goes on. I am stumped at this point. So there are many things that are happening. The lacquer's on, it's dried, it hasn't changed the finish. I've got different colour woods on each side. The fly speck, and I'm pretty sure that that's original fly speck. So if you're not quite sure what fly speck is, it is fly excrement that has sat on the wood over the years, and it's kind of seeped into the wood. and unfortunately the lacquer as well has drawn that out even more, and it does look really lovely on the top surface. I really like the finish, and I could go in with a little more fly speck over the whole piece once I'm finished. I'm a little bit unsure whether just to be defeated with the stain on the lower half. I could add the paint inlays with lacquer on the corners. I was going to paint out this trim with a green that matched the paint inlays, which would draw your eye to the flat colour, it is a flat colour. Okay, the lacquer has dried and I'm not happy with the way this is looking. I feel like I could proceed forward and make this good by just adding the paint inlays in the corners and painting the trim a little darker with a green, which I think would be lovely. The fly speck, which is a natural process. So if you're not quite sure what fly speck is, it is fly excrement, which is sat on the varnish finish over time, and it's seeped into the timber. And unfortunately, as I add wet to this, it's kind of bleeding through on the edges of the drawers. It is on the top, but it looks really, really lovely on the top. I really like that. But it is kind of around the edge of each drawer. I could add the darker colour, which would draw your eye into the lighter in the centre, but the grain isn't showing. I'd hope to have the grain showing with the paint inlays over the top. I think I'm a little bit defeated with this grain IOD paint inlay over the top. It may be for another project. I'm just going to finish my cup of tea and work out my next step. I think I am going to paint the lower half a solid colour. Now it's had the lacquer coat, hopefully it will keep the fly speck at bay and it should look a little bit more solid. Plus the fact I can add my paint inlays directly to the chalk paint colour that I mix, and it'll be a little bit easier. So watch this space. I'm going to finish this, ponder over what to do. I won't be defeated. It's all about the journey, I suppose, and the end results. How you get there. Does it matter? 4 hours sanding. Yeah, maybe it does matter. Okay, so I've made a decision. We are going to paint over the lower half. I'm not going to continue. I just feel like it's a little bit too mismatched and I want that solidness. Sometimes a piece of furniture will kick back at you and you have to do a complete U-turn on your Well, what a difference one coat of paint can truly make. It's just about dry, and on inspection, none of the fly speck, the bleed through, is coming to the surface of the chalk paint. Probably to do with the lacquer coat that we put over the wood stain originally, which has prevented it coming through the chalk paint. So I'm really happy at this stage. So I'm going to move on to the paint inlays. I'm going to cut them out, but I wanted to show you Petit Fleur, which is a beautiful rose trim and border selection, but there are two different colorways to this, one of which is kind of quite bright red, which is the one that I had originally chosen to use, but now on inspection of this overall colour with the Versailles in that colour mix, it's got an undercurrent of green in there, and I think the pale one now is my favourite with this colour. I'll hold them up. All we're going to do is pop little corners into each drawer. And I think the red one is probably a little too strong for this pale colour. Maybe I will save the red one for a black painted piece because I think it'll look absolutely beautiful on there. But for now, I'm going to start cutting out all of my corners, working out the layout of where I want to put this. I don't want to go overkill. Probably a rose in each corner of each drawer, maybe some detail on this curved edge, I'm not too sure yet, and definitely the side panels with maybe a motif in the centre of those side panels, and we'll work from there. I had considered adding the green to the trim, but I'm going to get these on first and work out how it looks. I will connect in with a little key line, I think, between each rose corner. But for now, let's get these cut out, let's get these onto the drawer fronts and work out where this project is going to go to next. So I've taken my drawers out because I'm going to work on the drawers first with the little corners. So there are two different sizes of corner, a larger one and a smaller one, which is probably quite good for this project because the top drawers are slightly smaller than the bottom drawers. So I think I'm going to use the larger corners on the bottom drawers and the smaller corners on the top drawers, and maybe add a touch more somewhere else, more detail somewhere else. So I'm just going to lay them out first and see how they look, a dry fit. So I think that's pretty good. I'm going to bring back the handles and I'm going to change the handles. I'm not going to go with the originals. I'm going to bring back some little round knobs, which I think will work really well. And then we can see if it will look good with something maybe in the center. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the layout. I did cut out 2 different embellishments for the center. This very plain one, which will stretch from each handle, or this one with the open center with the touch of golden tone. And I've decided to go with that, having the open center and the gold. I think it's just a little bit more dynamic. Whereas that's generic, it's very similar to the other ones, and adding the touch of gold I think will really work. So that's what I'm going to use. First up, I am going to be applying this directly into chalk paint. So I'll be applying a coat of chalk paint with an art brush, laying them down face down into the chalk paint once I'm happy with where they're located. And then something a little different. I normally spray the back of these just to activate them, but I'm not going to spray because I think it will get quite a lot of water going on. I've just got a little art brush and a pot of water. So once it's dropped into the chalk paint, I'm just going to use my brush to wet over it and push it into the chalk paint without going too close to the edge. I don't want there to be an edge showing. So it's something that I've never tried. I said that at the beginning of this video. Fingers crossed this will work. Who knows? So I'm going to go with this one first. And I do need to make sure I know exactly where it's going. So what I'll do is I will eyeball. I'll use my fingers on each rose and marry it into where there is the holes, and I can centralize it from the keyhole, and then we should have it almost center. So let's add a touch of chalk paint to that center area, and then we can start adding these in. You can see the paper has gone back opaque, so that tells you it's dry top and bottom and ready to come off. I'm going to remove them the same way as I applied them, with a little bit of water with a paintbrush, just to loosen the carrying sheet. So in with a little bit of water, just delicately placing the water on, so it absorbs that carrying sheet. line which corresponds to the colour that's in there. So I've kind of mixed up fur and a touch of Amsterdam green to get that colour. I'll be using a rigger brush. This brush is quite a long haired brush, and I will just 10% water the paint down to get some fluency. These brushes are awesome for doing long, thin lines because they carry a lot of paint so that you can keep on going in a smooth motion. Also, just to help myself out, I've used a ruler and a pencil just to mark out that line so I can follow it as neat as possible. If there's a little bit of a wobble, it will all add into the hand-painted feel of this overall piece. Well, that's all of the decorative paintwork finished on this piece, and as you guys know, it's been a super long, challenging project. But one thing that I would say to you guys to take away from this tutorial is where there is a problem, there's always a solution when it comes to furniture painting. Sometimes you just get those pieces that just decide they want to go in a different direction to the way that you want them to go. So that all that's left to do now is give the back side of the piece a coat of paint. I'm going to use the colour mix up. I'm going to use the leftovers of the base coat. I'm going to give the whole piece a coat of clear wax, reapply the handles and pop this back into the house tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to seeing this in our guest bedroom, the smallest room of the house. It's got a cottagey vibe to it, so I'm really excited to place it back there. And if you're new here and this is the first time you've seen me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave me a like, a comment. I will always do my best to come back to you if there's a question, and I will catch you all next time.